Welcome, everybody. This is the Assembly Rules Committee for February 8th, 2024. It's 1:02 p.m. and we'll go ahead and do call to order. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll?
Member Brawley?
Here.
Member Bronga?
Here.
Member Constant?
Here.
Member Cross is absent. Member Johnson?
Here.
Member Martinez?
Present.
Member Myers?
Here.
Member Perez Verdilla?
Here.
Member Rivera?
Present.
Member Solt?
Here.
Member Volland? Also absent. And Member Zalatel, it's my understanding she's absent as well.
Thank you. So we do have a quorum and we have on our agenda a handful of items. Going to take us, I think, the majority of the time, if not all, plus. So we'll get started. Mr. Hess, Employee Awards.
Thank you, Chris. As you're all aware, our office, we present an award called the Above and Beyond Award. We do that for community members, but we also do it for employees. And anybody, a member of the public, a member of the assembly, an employee supervisor can nominate an employee to be recognized with the Above and Beyond Award. And we normally go out to the department and present it. Today, we have a couple of awards that I actually submitted the nomination for, and it's to recognize, I wanted to do it at the Assembly Rules Committee because I wanted to let the Assembly members know how these two employees go above and beyond every day. And it's our Deputy Ombudsman, May Ramirez-Zhang, and our Associate Ombudsman, Heather McAlpine. And, you know, we are located on the first floor of City Hall. And when the transit center, you know, to the west closed a couple of years ago, the number of individuals coming to City Hall and Kaladi's Coffee increased dramatically. Then Kaladi's closed across the street and the number of people increased again. And I told Heather the other day, I said, Heather, you're a saint. I was watching her deal with somebody. We had somebody 2 weeks ago that came in our office. They licked the counter, they licked the chairs, they licked the door. They had some issues. We sometimes have to deal with individuals who come in. It may take both May and Heather. I may have to go out there and it takes three of us. And sometimes it's 40, 45 minutes or an hour, but we cannot refuse to assist the vulnerable people who come into our office. So when you look at the large map of the new bus routes that's in the lobby, our office put that up. You look at the table with those community resource lists, the food bank lists, all the other documents. We go through 500 or 600 copies a month. We are the #1 distribution site in the Anchorage, in the municipality, for bus schedules. City Hall, this is a public building and it should be a resource for members of the public, regardless of their status, regardless if they're housed or not. And I really appreciate what May and Heather do every day. We had an individual come in recently when it was 20 below. They had been kicked out of the emergency shelter. They were afraid they were going to freeze to death. And I know May and Heather spent a lot of time, talked to Alexis at the health department. We found out that there is an appeal process for members of the public who are kicked out of the shelters. They walk this individual through the appeal process, help them fill out the form. So we keep in touch with Alexis and Kim at the health department to make sure we have the most current data to assist members of the public. But I really wanted to recognize Heather and May for all that they do for all the members of the public in Anchorage. So May and Heather.
I've been admiring the cups in the office for a long time. So. Thank you, Daryl. Daryl, you come.
Nice, lovely. Congrats, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. So next, reports. So I don't have an extensive report today, but I do want to share with members a plan that I've been developing over the last week or two for March. The intent is to utilize the 5 Fridays of March to host some community conversations. There'll be work sessions, but we'll call them roundtables, I think, on issues relating to our priorities, but really to hear from, if we can get them in the room, various stakeholders in the community, AEDC, ACDA, the zoo, the museum, Visit Anchorage, a whole number of different organizations to kind of have a conversation to spark a vision for the future and also to talk about what's coming up in the short term this summer for their organizations and what's good, because we hear all together too much about what's not good. And so for the month of March, I intend to organize some working conversations with our partners in the community, talk about what's good. And so we do have the unusual opportunity to have 5 Fridays in March. And so I'm working with legislative team right now to develop the concept. So with that, otherwise, I would note I'm out for the next week. Mr. Rivera will be chairing, Mr. Presradil will be vice chairing for the meeting on Tuesday. And otherwise, things in the branch are good. So next, the legislative team.
Thank you. And to hello, everyone on the phone. We have been working a lot on planning for 2024. So working on your work plan and our office work plan. We have, you have a number of contracts you put into the budget last year. So we're working on getting those going. So we have our RFP process for pre-approved designs. We're doing a project for a sanitation and restroom survey. And then housing communications for the housing action plan, as well as continuing the alcohol tax education campaign. Allie's helped some members do presentations. Members Cross and Myers presented out at the Eagle River Chamber of Commerce yesterday. So that's a reminder, if any of you have groups you'd like to get in front of or regions, to let us know, and we'd be happy to help you with presentations and talking points and that sort of thing. We've been working to prepare for the visit to AML in a couple of weeks and visits with legislators. We've also been doing a lot of communications with our state and federal delegations to make sure they know the issues that you are working on here in Anchorage. And then our kind of big projects that are ongoing right now are the rollout for the Prop 14 early education and childcare program, the alcohol tax strategic plan, and elections communications. And then I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Hartman, Allie, to talk about a postcard of your progress report we just sent out.
Yes. So I am here with a lovely copy. This was a proof version of a postcard that was sent late last month and was hitting mailboxes over the last week or two. If you didn't receive one, that is because this postcard was distributed to 105,000 randomly selected residences all throughout the municipality. We wanted to learn a little bit about what this method of communication would look like. It's something that we've talked about for years. And so this felt like a good opportunity as you all are working through your 2023 accomplishments and prepping the 2024 work plan to reach people who might not be tuned into what you all are doing as a body, who might not be following the newsletter or getting updates, through news outlets, trying to understand what communications methods are effective. So this was a bit of an experiment and a trial. And so I'm excited today to be able to report back on some of the outcomes of that experiment. As I mentioned, 105,000 postcards went out. The total cost of the project was $50,000. And so that comes out to about 50 cents per postcard. 47 cents to be specific. The printing and mailing costs were around $44,000. And so then the design that we did through Thompson and Company, which is on a 3-year contract with the Muni, was around $5,000. Good to keep in mind for future projects if there are assembly-wide initiatives. We had considered doing something along these lines for the Housing Action Initiative. The costs associated with doing that level of communication. And again, that didn't even go to everybody, right? So if you triple that number, that's what we're dealing with. So the postcard included a call to action, a little QR code that directed residents to a survey to just tell you all what they are interested in and what are their top priorities as residents of the municipality. As of this morning, there were 173 survey responses. And so out of the total run of this entire postcard project, we're only talking about a 0.16% engagement rate, right? So I think that says something about how people receive their mail. We also have the survey results. So again, this is a pretty small sample size. It's not a representative sample, but they shared some really interesting observations and insights about the work that you all do and what they consider top issues for their community. And so I'll be distributing an electronic version via email after the Rules Committee meeting of those survey results, and you can take a look. There are only 5 questions. We kept it short and sweet. So really easy digestible data from that. And then there were also an open text option where people were able to just give you their thoughts on the top issues. And I will say that of those that we had listed that were based on your work plan and on your priorities, the other, which was this open text response, had a lot to say about education. So you'll see that theme, throughout the rest of the report. All this to say, would love to chat if you have specific questions or you're hearing questions from your constituents about the postcard. Happy to answer those. But overall, very thankful that we had the opportunity to do this project, and I think we've learned a lot from it.
Ms. Braga.
I know you guys saw that email about the person who couldn't figure out the QR code, and George and I are going to Chester Park Cooperative, and we got the same feedback from the woman who's having us come. She wanted to know if we could bring a paper copy of the survey for the residents. I don't know, be kind of a booger to transpose all that stuff, but I think it's hard for older people to do the QR thing.
Yeah, I certainly am open to printing off a paper copy, and they could complete it, and I'm happy to add it to the data that we have archived. That's definitely not a problem, especially on like a case-by-case basis.
2 questions, Karen. What is that group? And I wonder if we could set up a tablet or a couple of tablets that you could take with you so that they could actually just sit and go through it there, because having them fill it out on paper would be the same amount of time, although they could distribute it. So it might be easier to get 10 people to do it at once if it's on paper, but it might be possible. Yeah, it might be possible to actually get it that way. So what is this cooperative?
Chester Park Cooperative, it's on Patterson and Muldoon. It's the senior living place. It's independent senior living.
Okay, awesome. Anyone? Mr. Johnson, Zach, sorry, first name's Rules Committee.
How long do you plan on keeping the survey up and active?
We saw the greatest influx of survey responses immediately after these hit inboxes. And so since then we've gotten, a trickle of maybe 10 responses a day, which is great. So as long as we continue getting responses, I'll keep it open. And then once it dwindles down to like 1, I'll go ahead and close it on up.
Yeah, sounds good. I was going to make a plug for it at the community council meetings coming up.
We definitely. So Claire was just saying maybe we could add it to the website and try to get more responses as well. Folks that maybe didn't receive the postcard would be able to access it that way as well. I think, and this is maybe getting into the intent behind the project to begin with. Really interesting information, some insightful, feedback for you all to digest. My interest was in having something that says, when people receive the postcard, do they do something with it, right? Are they interested in engaging with the assembly? So if it starts to get more into a survey where we're collecting responses that aren't just specific to the postcard, I think that changes how we understand the results of the survey. And so I'm open to it, certainly. But I just think that kind of shifts then what the survey is doing.
All right, Ms. Bry.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I guess I would suggest one that having done surveys before, I always notice whenever you push it out, that's when you get a little spike of responses. So I think maybe instead of continuing this one, maybe another idea is to just take the same survey content, launch it maybe March 1st or, whenever, give it another date, and then we can push it out through these other channels. And then it's possible that we'll get overlap in responses, but maybe we could just reuse the content and use it as another little kind of project on its own. Because I think keep your results cleaner.
All right, I think it's probably enough for that. Anything else? All right, Madam Clerk.
So I hope that this is the last Rules Committee meeting that I have to give a staffing update. I made an offer yesterday and I'm expecting acceptance for the budget analyst position. And so if that comes to fruition, we could be fully staffed by February 20th. And I want to give a shout out to Mandy Honest, who has been helping me manage through without a budget analyst in the last month. For the election, the ballots have been finalized and we'll be heading off to the printer here soon. And our notice of election will be in Sunday's paper. And then we are doing logic and accuracy testing on February 29th. And then also throughout the month of February, our training starts for our election workers.
All right, anything else? Questions, Ms. Bry?
First, thank you. I am personally excited about having a budget analyst going into first quarter budget revisions because that is our one staff person, and I know that's one of many jobs. Question: if somebody does want to be an election worker, how could they get in contact with the clerk's office?
Send a resume to elections@anchorageak.gov.
Anything else on that? All right. Yeah. Looking forward to having that analyst on too, because I hate asking you to do those jobs. You should not be an SAP. So as much as possible, you should not be in there. You have bigger fish to fry. So, okay, then next, I think we're going to hand the conversation over to the Ombudsman again, Daryl.
Thank you, Chris. Just a quick update on the Community Council 10-year boundary review. At the last Rules Committee meeting, I reported the phase 1 of the project was completed in September when the Community Council's Boundary Review Committee completed their work and made their recommendations. Planning got a little sidetracked fourth quarter of 2023. They've got a lot of projects going on. So first quarter of 2024, their goal was to, get the proposed maps and the changes out for a 2-month comment period to allow the public to provide feedback and comments and for community councils to submit resolutions if they'd like to. They're running a little behind. So at the last meeting, I said the goal was to get it to planning and zoning by April. It's now looking more like May. And the P&Z will hold a public hearing and then we'll vote recommendations, which will go to the assembly. It's looking like early summer, sometime in June, for the assembly to hold the final public hearing and take the final action on the boundaries, community council boundaries. So it's little behind the schedule that I mentioned at the last committee meeting, but not too far behind.
Any questions? So I look forward to that process coming forward. There may be some slight suggested changes when it gets to us. I just want to put that out there that the assembly may also take a stab, but thank you for keeping us up to date on this. And I think just to keep in continuity with boundaries and borders, I'm going to flip the agenda slightly and move up the elections update. Since we have staff here from the election center and we're talking about lines on a map, I would like to get that conversation rolling and done so that we can let our staff go back to doing their important work of preparing for the election that's coming up. So, Jamie.
Okay, thank you. So we're trying to have training at every rules committee meeting, and last meeting we started talking a little bit about adjusting the boundary lines for the districts, and we also had our ballot initiatives on our January 24th, 23rd and 24th meeting. And so it just seemed like it would be a great opportunity to talk a little bit about ballot styles. You hear us a lot say that we have 166 ballot styles. I think at one point last year it was 198 ballot styles. And when we think, well, we only have 6 districts or whatever, it seems like a lot. And so what we wanted to show you is this map that GIS puts together for us. And so there are yellow lines and green lines kind of outside the outer edge. There are red lines in the middle. There are blue lines, and then there's this purple shaded area. So those are kind of the important areas. The blue lines are precincts. The red lines are assembly districts. The green line out here is the park service area. The yellow line right here is fire service area, Anchorage Fire Service Area. And the shaded purple area is ARDSA. And so when we look at an area such as this right here by Merrill Field, we have a precinct, precinct 610, follows Chester Creek up to Bar. I don't know what that street is. It's not labeled. And Airport Heights right here. And this precinct is in 3 different districts. So that is 3 different ballot styles for that one little precinct. We have one card that's precinct 605 for District 4, one for District 5, and one for District 1. Did I say that right?
610 is it?
Oh, 610. I was saying 610. So 610 is 1, 5, and 4.
And then it's even more complicated down in the hillside.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's where I was going next. So in 75, the greater Anchorage area borough and the city of Anchorage consolidated. And I believe that's sort of what drives ARDSA and the limited road service areas. And we were required to keep our road service areas when we consolidated. And so all of our road service areas are these shadings down here, the pink and the yellow and the green. So here is precinct 230. And in this precinct, I can't even count how many ballot styles there are quickly. We have Lake Hill Limited Road Service Area, Raven Woods Babbling Brook, Valley View, Rock Hill, Homestead, Upper Grover. And Liz always wanted to bonk me on the head because there's this tiny little corner of Upper O'Malley. And I always forgot about it when we were checking our database. So in addition to out of road service areas, we have out in all these different 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 8 ballot styles for this one. And then when you guys were talking about making so Upper O'Malley Limited Road Service Area plows Rock Ridge, which is right here. And there was conversation about making this little area part of ARDSA or not. That's what this little line is. That was where that was going to be. We were starting to develop that in the event that that ordinance was to have passed. And so that would have added another ballot style to that little area right there. And so when you look at the results, you can often see ins and outs. It's all the ins that are on the front page, but in the back, you'll find a lot more sets of results that talk more about the ins and outs. And so when you're in the election center and you hear us saying in Ardsa, in Upper O'Malley, in fire, in park, out fire, that's what these mean, is what are the lines that affect that little area.
So a couple of questions, myself and Ms. Brawley. Do you know, there's been a conversation that we aren't going to tackle until after the election, and the acting elections coordinator has decided that this place isn't too much and he's going to stick around, that we would contemplate dividing the LRSA elections to a separate election, maybe in the fall. Do you know how many ballot styles we would boil down to if we did that? Do you have a sense?
Not off the top of our heads.
Maybe we can get that number at some point.
Sure.
And I know with the Park Service and other concerns, there are still going to be some deviations up there, but it would be nice to know how it boils. Ms.
Sure.
Brawley.
Yeah, and I'll preface this by saying, I know this is a much bigger discussion, so I'm not trying to reopen the can of worms about LRSAs, but I am curious. So what I've heard about LRSAs generally is they pay for themselves in terms of administration, because part of the taxes that folks pay in there go toward the administration of the LRSA. But what I'm also hearing is there's a cost, smaller probably, but to the clerk's office. Do you guys receive any funding through any of the service areas to the clerk's office for the election? Like, does that factor in?
I would say no, but without a budget analyst, she might have known if we got a AGC or CGS or whatever that is. But I don't know that.
IGC.
IGC.
That's it.
That.
So, yeah, I think that's interesting. Who otherwise pays for the election? That's an interesting question. I don't think ARDSA pays for election fees.
No, I mean,
And
it's
so
the
I'm guessing
elections, I believe in the charter, are under the
Area-wide.
tax cap. So
in the cap.
in the cap.
Yeah, no, I think it's an area-wide expense for all of it. And I think we've had some discussions in the past about ways to make it different, but I don't know that we'd want to do that. Mr. Gates.
Oh, well, I don't really have answers, but I do know that in Title 27 for the road service areas and service areas, when they develop their budget, they're supposed to accommodate administrative expenses that go to the departments. That should include, expenses here for the elections. But I mean, like Jamie, as Heinz said, we need budget analysts to track down if we're really getting those costs recovered.
Yeah,
And
and
administrative
I
expense
doubt we
behind
do.
them.
I mean, if that's the case, we would have a separate revenue stream that you'd recognize, because ARDSA would be a substantial IGC. It would come in a huge chunk because there's so many voters. And so what I'm recalling is we had a discussion about making special elections the responsibility of, like recalls, the responsibility of the district where the recall is. And the rebuttal to that was, no, the way it's set up, it's an area-wide expense, and it should be, because fair is fair. And I think that argument won the day at the time. And so, but it would be great to understand what the code directs for those expenses and then figure out, because I think we'd see a huge check or IGC otherwise. Ms. Froy.
Yeah, and just to be clear too, I'm not suggesting that we pursue that necessarily, legality or otherwise, but I think it's important just to recognize that that the costs for administration include like the work that you guys do and the number of ballots that we have. So I think in that bigger conversation about what this looks like going forward, just recognizing that there are other costs like this that compound the more, not just LRSAs, but the more special districts we have, or the more variations of districts. I think that's really important to understand.
Right. And we do order ballots for all of the areas, right? So we say we have 166 ballot styles, but this year it dwindled down to 28 types. But we do order ballots for each of the different areas so that if they were walk into a vote center, we had a ballot for them. And I sort of forgot to go into this a little bit, but as we were talking about last meeting, the redistricting and maybe the fine tuning of redistricting. Like you can see down here, the district line is the red line and the precinct line is the blue line. And there's actually not anybody that lives there. And so we can fine tune that by making the district line follow the precinct line without any impact to voters in this area. It may not work so well in this area right here. There's people that live in that area, so that would affect the bottom line numbers. And then also, for example, in this Northern Lights area, it could be a minor adjustment, but then you'd have to find an adjustment elsewhere. So anyway, that might be a future discussion.
Anyone else? All right. Thanks for making it up and sticking around. You don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting. Awesome. And let's keep that map. I think it's got some utility at this point. Yeah. All right. So then rolling back on the agenda, and I think that took less than 20 minutes. So thank you. We'll go back to our progress report, 2024. Claire.
I'm hoping this goes quick. I just wanted you all to give it a final read through and let me know if you want to make any edits. I think you also got, yeah, I wrote up an AR that would accompany this. And so I will submit it as soon as you are ready. Did anyone have any final edits you wanted to make to the report?
Yeah, you gave me an idea. Watch out.
All right, time's up there. No more ideas are allowed.
So we might talk about this after the next discussion, the committee's discussion. So in an email conversation, you had suggested that maybe we should tie new committees or committee names to our priorities. Maybe not, but maybe we should. It's not a terrible idea. And in fact, I just went through and wrote which committees are in the purview of these areas. And so I think as a final draft change, it might be wise to append under each section, I know it's getting tight with data, which committees have this and this and this. So like assembly businesses, rules, infrastructure and transportation, EOC, economic development, CEDC, and the public health, safety, quality of life. This is, again, if we make a decision to change, or I make the decision after feedback, and housing and homes, clearly that's already named. And so it might be nice to tie this then into the committees. Yeah. So hopefully that's not a terrible idea to riff off of what you suggested. But so then I would say, Zach, did you have an input?
Oh, it's so tiny, but I just noticed on this page, Juneteenth, the J is not bolded. So
Oh yeah, it's
under
like the
public
seventh bullet,
health,
eighth
safety,
bullet
and
down,
quality of life.
first section.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Good eye. Dean? Yeah, Dean?
Sorry, something just stood out to me. Anyway, I just wondered when's the deadline for, comments or edits? You have this for the 27th meeting?
10 minutes ago.
Now, yeah, I mean, I did send it out to everyone last week and said that Tuesday was the deadline to get edits in for this discussion. So I'm hoping you can look at it right now and give me edits.
Okay, so that works. And so anyone else on this for now? No, we may briefly come back to this after. Go ahead.
One more thing on
Mr.
the
Chair, I'm not
I'm
sure
sorry,
if it's on my
Felix,
text.
go ahead. Go ahead, Felix.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Chris. So I really appreciate all of the work put into this. And on your suggestion, Chris, and sorry, can I ask that everyone turn off their mics? Okay. So on your suggestion, Chris, I think that's a good idea. I know that there are some committees, but especially my committee, the Housing and Homelessness Committee, under the Assembly Legislative and Budget Priorities, part of the agenda of the Housing and Homelessness Committee, there are actually a bullet list of all of the, currently it's the 2023 priorities. It'll be switched once this is adopted to the 2024 priorities. And I pull them under our committee to make sure that the committee is tracking them. And we did accomplish all of the 2023 priorities that were under the Housing and Homelessness Committee. So it is a good tool to help keep track of all of that. I did have one suggestion, and I apologize. I'm not sure how or if this came into the discussion when you all have been reviewing this in rules, but under the homelessness category, and it doesn't look like there's much room. So I'll make this suggestion, and I will just leave it up to legislative staff to figure it out. But there is going to be a project that is happening that is going to be refining our camp abatement code. And I also think that we need to prepare for whatever U.S. Supreme Court ruling comes down. So I have a short bullet that encapsulates both of those things, might be worth adding into the homelessness bucket here.
Great. If you send that to me, I can incorporate it.
We'll just move down to a size 7 font for you, Felix. Yeah, I know. So everyone will get issued magnifying glasses. So I was making a joke, but we can figure out how to fit on a page, or we can expand the document to 6 pages, or, we can figure out a way. Because currently it's 4 pages.
Excuse me, Chair. I was just thinking before it gets added to here, we should maybe take a look at what he wants to add.
Oh,
Not that I was
see.
worried about the font.
I see. I got you. I understand now. So Felix, would you go ahead and send a brief statement to Legislative Services? They can circulate that. But I think that this document would be subject to amendment even at the last minute. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah. And so if and when the item comes before us, then an amendment could be made at the last minute if the language isn't quite right. We would ask folks to resist to that, because all this work leading up to it is to get us to a very, very, very near final document. But an option. Ms. Briley.
Yeah, just a suggestion. Felix should send in the specific wording, but I think what he's trying to say is that we should have a plan for responding to that, or because it will impact how we do things. So it's maybe neutral on what that response is. It's just that it will happen probably, and so we need to plan for that regardless of the outcome. I think that's maybe what I was hearing him say.
Yeah, it is happening, whatever the outcome. The review is underway. Okay, is everyone okay with that idea? Felix is going to send some language. The language is going to get circulated by Legislative Services, but they can incorporate it. And once the document comes our way, it's subject to amendment. We just ask members really think about if it's warranted at that time, because while we can amend almost any document that comes before us, it's not always wise. We can't amend every document like the school board budget, but or at least the text of the school board budget. Anyhow, so it's good product. No, Claire?
Can I add one more thing?
Sure. I think there's room.
I recognize, as especially Vice Chair Zalatel always says, you're a member of 12 individuals and you can make legislation and projects of your own choosing at any time. And of course, things will come up throughout the year, opportunities that we don't know about that you'll want to work on. But I think part of having this document is the Assembly has been doing a lot of work the last few years, I think more probably than previous assemblies. And this just helps everyone stay on track and make sure by the end of the year you've worked on the things that are most important to you. And it helps it. I think we are really going to try to use this. And if you ask us to do a project, we're probably going to ask you, how does it fit into these priorities? And so just keeping that in mind, that if there's anything that you plan to work on that's big next year and it's not on here, maybe get that to me soon, get that to the body soon to review. And just please try to stick to this as much as possible, because that way staff and all of the machinery that helps support your work can be organized and stay on track to make sure you get the most important things done this year.
So My only caveat to that whole statement is that assembly members, if they can convince a majority, can make amendments, can add additional projects. And so members always have that right at any time in the year. But it's a resource allocation issue for having support and staff and time and where it fits. And people get frustrated when their projects don't rise up as quickly as they might want. It used to be really hard when we only had one attorney. It's much easier now, even though it's still challenging, because there's 12 members and endless priorities. And so it's like this balancing act between, we want to get this done. This thing came up. It's not quite here, but maybe it should be. We can figure this out over time. Anyhow, so that's the only caveat I would say to that is you do have a right. So, ready for the next one, Claire?
All right, we brought this up briefly at the last Rules Committee meeting. At a retreat a few years ago, you asked that we do an annual review of all the committees to make sure that you have the right committees for your workload, that the committees have the right people, the right topics, that sort of thing. And so we talked about it a little bit last month, and then it actually started to bubble up into more of a conversation. So we put it on the agenda again today. And I think I'll throw it back to you to discuss what you want to discuss. I think the Public Safety Committee and getting all the reports was one of the things that was up for discussion, is how you want to set the agendas and run those meetings. And then a couple of you did get feedback to me that I can bring up if you don't remember to bring it up during discussion, but I'll just throw it all back to you.
We were just throwing things around in this committee today. So I think we should hand it to Jamie. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. No, I'm totally just kidding. I was being a jerk, actually. Okay. So conversation about committees. The chair sets the committees. The chair wants to set the committees that the body wants. That way, everybody feels like it's their work and they have buy-in and they're going to do it and show up, because our work works best when all 12 of us are here picking up our part and carrying it forward. So the committee structures are always challenging. And I think I could speak for the clerk on this one thing about committees. There is no time for new committees. There's no time to add an hour here or an hour there. It sounds like just a little thing, just an hour. My friends at the community councils, they're like, it's just 1 hour a month. That's all we ask. And I'm like, you have no idea how many just 1 hours there are in a month. And so with that in mind, any expansion of mission should fit within a numeric bound, the numeric bound being roughly the committees we have. And I said it when I first was the chair, my goal is to reduce the number of committees, but figure out how to make sure we have a place for every department head within this municipality to have a committee that they report to, that they feel comfortable with. And I don't know that we've quite gotten there. So that's my overarching view. But with that said, our work does seem to fall into some areas of kind of general predictability, I guess, or a fit. And I do love this idea that some folks have proposed to change the focus of the Health Policy Committee to be, what was it again? Health and Safety. Yeah. So that's a conversation, and I won't speak at much to that, but it fits right there with what's on our list of our priorities. And so seems like that's a good, already well established within what we're doing change. Housing and homelessness for now continues to be a priority that stands on its own. I heard Felix is going to be the chair for the next 2 years.
Ha ha ha.
There you go. No, that ha 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 is that he may be seeking some help to lead that committee in the not too distant future, like July. And so I guess, and that speaks to something else about our committee structures. It takes members to lead these committees. It's work, and it takes stewardship by a member or two to see that these committees happen, that their agendas are meaningful, that it's achieving the work that we want. And so it's not just, hey, we need to do a committee. It's, hey, I want to do this committee. It's like, what am I willing to do? It's the JFK model. Ask not what your assembly can do for you, but what you can do for your assembly. That way we get this work done. So economic development, I think it's got a pretty good purview. doesn't seem to need too much change. We don't have a committee for quality municipal services, which is interesting to me. Assembly business is, again, it's clearly the rules committee. This is where we discuss our business. And so that has a natural link. And infrastructure and transportation, in some ways, I hate to expand the scope of that committee too much, but it has historically been the enterprises and utilities. We've talked about also making it responsible for maintenance and operations conversations, which is plowing and roads. But we also now have a quarterly transportation committee that is tackling questions about roads specifically. So that might mean between quality municipal services, which is a lot of things. It's HR, it's labor relations, it's
Enterprise and utility kind of too, right?
right. In some ways it is, right? But I don't think we can expand the enterprise and utilities that far because the mission of that committee is, I think when I think of it, I hate to put it this way, it's big Tonka trucks. It's all the big trucks hauling out there, whatever they might be, the big heavy equipment moving stuff, the heavy water systems, gas, those kind of questions are a fit for there. So anyhow, as a predicate to this conversation, there's some good fit within our priorities for the structure of our committees. And there's been some input. We should hear from that. And now I have Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thanks. So I can jump in on the health and safety one. So I'll just also preface, I talked to Chris about this. I talked to Daniel about this, who I don't think, no, he's not here. I didn't get to talk to anybody else, obviously, so that's why I'm bringing it today. And I did listen to last month's rules committee because I missed it. So I'm proposing, and again, not imposing on that committee because I'm not the chair of either of those, combining public health and, the health policy and public safety committees and whatever that needs to look like. And my rationale is this, because we've been talking about the three legs of public safety, one of which is health. And then just practically speaking, both of those committees are an hour and a half. They happen every month. They often happen right after our assembly meetings on Wednesday mornings, which I know is challenging. And I've just noticed really low attendance at health policy, which includes me sometimes, right? So I think there's also the practicality of how many hours we are asking each other to sit in meetings and what we're there for. And that's no shade on any of the chairs, right? It's just the reality. And it seems like, I know Cameron had brought up in the last rules committee, just that it feels like a lot of reporting. And so I feel like there's other ways that those committees, or, if they were one committee, could work on agenda. That's not my job, but I wanted to bring that because I think there is synergy there. And I think also it'd be interesting to have more of the police and fire folks in the room with the health folks and vice versa. I think there's some value there. So anyway, that's what I'm putting on the table for discussion. And as I said, not my committee, so not my decision.
But I'm seeking input from everybody. So anyone else? Ms. Braga.
I really like that idea. I feel like the Health Policy Committee is one of the most overlooked. 9:15 in the a.m. and we're sitting there with two people and you get a guest speaker and, they're kind of wondering why they bothered. They're hoping people watch the recording later, but to put those together, I think would be some good energy.
I hate to be a cynic, but I think that we have seen a real deterioration in the ability of our health department to function from the top down. And I think that is reflected in our participation in that committee because the dynamic is just, it became so toxic, people walked away. And so I love the idea of reconfiguring it, rebooting it. And I don't think any meeting should be at 9 a.m. the day after an assembly meeting ever, if people want attendance, because for the most part, it's just too taxing. With that said, I have Cameron in the queue.
Thanks. And I really appreciate, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I really appreciate the proposal. And I've said this before, and I actually had some conversations with members or the administration members of the Public Safety Committee about the purpose of that committee and how we used our time effectively. And some may not know that, for at least the last 2 years, we've had a pre-meeting before the public safety meeting about 2 weeks before. So me and Kevin Cross and before that, just me, and before that, Crystal Kennedy would have a meeting with the chief of police, the chief of the fire department, a representative from the Department of Law, and now someone from the emergency center, and really sort of talk about what should be at this meeting. And primarily, their interest was bringing all of their work and all of the things that they thought were important forward, and using that meeting as a time to share information. So, so I'm definitely open to the idea of merging these two committees. I think a lot of what is shared at the Public Safety Committee can be emailed out and doesn't have to necessarily be at a meeting. I would also just say that I think the merging of it offers an opportunity, and I think this is where Anna was going, to talk about what we mean by public safety. And this last public safety meeting was a really good example of, again, reporting out on the statistics for the police department and the fire department. And I think those are really helpful, but they don't necessarily help us to understand, in my opinion, how well we're doing in terms of public safety. And so I would just say, in short, that I encourage this dialogue, and I think the merging of them could be a good thing. The last thing I would say, and I think this adds to what Chris just said, I actually think that things have changed so significantly with the relationship with the administration, and that's what's changed the committees. We used to have a very strong relationship between the administration related to public safety, and they would bring things forward and we would work on them in the committee. That doesn't exist anymore. And so I think that's been one of the reasons why at least the Public Safety Committee has really changed, because of the relationship with the administration. So the only thing I would be cautious about is, if we do in the future have a different administration, we may want to think about changing this back, because I think there may be a need for this monthly time to work on things with the administration and with the public that we can bring forward to the assembly out of committee. So that's what I have to add. Thanks.
Well, I think, Cameron, that there's no reason that those meetings would stop, or wouldn't need to. I think that there is great value in having a regular monthly meeting between the assembly and the leadership of, say, the police department, for example, or police and fire. And my mission is to find a way that every major department has a place with us in these meetings, so that when there are burning fires in this or that department, folks know who the right members are to talk to. So we just bake it in. And I don't think that'll change in a new administration. I just think it has the possibility of, becoming more like it used to be, for lack of a better term, in terms of the interplay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that that there needs to be a way to have a direct link between the assembly and these departments and these department heads. And so, that's been what this is. The other thing that I think is interesting as we think about linking committees to departments, we recently had a meeting of the equity committee, and there was a conversation about, the struggles that committee is having in terms of, its relationship with figuring out how it can connect with the administration. And there was a discussion about the person who sits in the chief equity officer role, and that's not necessarily a strong relationship between the committee and that person. And so that's part of our structure, I think, trying to figure out what the purpose of these committees are and how they're connected to somebody in a senior position in the administration.
All right. Mr. Rivera, Felix.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I do like the idea of combining public health and, the health committee and the safety committee. It does feel like that would be somewhat of a super committee, because those are huge issues. Although I will say, I feel like when I attend both committees, that I feel like most of the time is probably reports, and agreeing with Cameron, I think those can just be emailed to us in advance so that we can focus on action. Because just looking here, I mean, I see action that we want to take as an assembly in these areas. And our constituents always ask us all the time, what are you doing with public safety? What are you doing in all of these things? And so I think it's important for us to have that venue, to have that action-oriented discussion rather than report-oriented discussion. I also think that, and maybe you all will just shoot this idea down, but I also think that combining those two committees allows for the opportunity for us, I think as you were saying, Chris, to look at, can we now create a venue that really looks at all of the quality of life issues? Because I don't see that really represented in most of our committees. I'm thinking things like Parks and Rec, the library. I know in the past, Chris, you wanted a committee to talk about education, and that for me is certainly a quality of life issue. So for me, I think the combination of those two committees creates the opportunity, if there's such a will, to really focus on all of the things that are maybe left out of other committees that we could quantify as quality of life.
As a part of public health and safety, or as its own?
As its own.
So I think that, as with the transportation committee, if we are going to add committees and we don't really have slots, that maybe they can be quarterly. So it's one meeting every 3 months, and maybe we could have a slot that fits so that in that slot every month it's one of these quarterly committees, right? So then we have one time slot to create for any new efforts that would be regular business. So we create a committee space for these more broad or longer term questions, the quarterlies. I think that there might be a way to meet the clerk's need of managing the clock and the calendar, but adding only in a way that doesn't overly tax everybody's time. Does that make
I think
sense?
that makes sense, Chris,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
I mean, especially as we start, like if this committee were to begin, we've never really, as the assembly, had a committee where we talked about the library or education or Parks and Rec. So
Right.
I imagine there would be a lot of work to figure out what exactly we want to do in some of these areas, especially like around education. So yeah, I think quarterly makes sense.
And where that makes sense on this graphic I'm looking at, it's quality of life and quality of services. Like there's kind of a fit there. So, okay, we'll have to chew on that some more. I'm going to ask Claire that you work with me to generate a list of all the departments and like us try to kind of correlate which departments are orphaned and see if there isn't kind of a natural breakdown of those. And as Felix said, quality of life, Parks and Rec, even transit, library. Trying to think of what other ones there are out there, but there are a handful of them that they don't individually rise to the level of warranting a committee, but together they could. Oh, IT, that's a big one. And that could fall under municipal services or infrastructure, because even though it's invisible and separate, it's essential. Okay, so Claire, do you think you got what you need? Okay, go ahead.
Just one observation. If you do have reporting, to mix up who reports each month, because at public safety, it's always police, fire, and then you take up so much of the time that sometimes the other things on the agenda, the EOC doesn't get a full report. So maybe mixing up who gets to go first each meeting.
That's interesting. And I put on my notes here, Felix, you mentioned a divide between action-oriented and report-oriented. And of course, my mind just asked the question, why not both? And I think that the way to do that is to create a hard limit of time for reports. 15 minutes, period, all 3 reports. And everyone will get the vibe, hey, we got to move on, and send them out early so people are prepared. Something along those lines, but we'll discuss that more. Okay, I think we have what we need. Oh, Karen.
So I kind of like I do like the stats. I mean, I go away from Health Policy Committee meeting going, oh, 3 gonorrhea cases this month. You know, it's interesting, and I know my constituents really enjoy the public safety stats. So, you know, as giving the time limits of this is how much time you have for them, but I do feel like they are valuable. And we can always pull out to a special work session if there's some larger health policy issue or public safety issue that we need to work on.
Yeah, and I just love this idea of making sure we get the reports we want and having action. So I don't know how we square that, but we'll figure that out, because you're right, the reports are valuable. When we get the annual breakdown of how many cars are stolen and we see we have crushed the car theft rings, it's great data to be able to share, and it's some optimistic stuff. And then on the other side, when there's some things that are slipping through that we need to address, those reports do help. So we'll figure out how to make that balance. And Felix, I might ask you for some more input on your thoughts on the difference between action and reporting, but not online. Next, or not on the phone, George.
Thank you, Chris. Just a couple of comments into the committee conversation.
Yep.
First, I think defining committee work from a vantage point of practicality is different than a vantage point of permanency. So the question for me raises, you just, to piggyback off of your point about the interestingness of some reports. From my vantage point, the Assembly's committee should be getting reports, not because they're interesting, but because they're valuable to the policy work that we're doing. And some of those reports might be interesting, go read them on the website, or use them toward policy work that is being accomplished. And when I think about it from that vantage point, in terms of a workflow, I think of the nature of committees, because they're not permanent and they're subject to being moving around every assembly, essentially, with a new 12 members or a percentage thereof, potentially. It seems that really getting clear about what we want from a committee is very, very important. And so I would articulate this. I think there's a difference between work themes that are distributed across different committees, and then there's a difference between committee focal points that might not necessarily focus on the totality of the thematic area. Quality of life would be an example. And the way quality of life shows up across economic development questions, transportation questions, education questions, public safety questions, is the way I'm understanding thematic work areas that are distributed versus a committee that houses something that is almost impossible to contain. So I just wanted to articulate that kind of stress in my mind. And then another suggestion is, it seemed that there's some interest in working with, like, the committee is a strategic think tank for administration, partnership. And that is a fine intentionality and ambition, but I don't believe that's necessarily the role. I think very specifically the role should be focused on back to the idea of toward policy, public interest, toward the legislative processes. And when and I highlight that because the conversation around the equity committee, for example, versus the alignment with the person who's the chief equity officer or anyone else in different situations, would be that working to align with them is different than our role of oversight, asking the questions and raising the public awareness of both the workflow and some of the challenges that may be present with the workflow.
All right, thank you. Anyone else on the committee question?
Thank you.
Hearing and seeing none, thank you, everybody. Oh, Jamie.
I've been studying the calendar and I was just going back to see when transportation, oil like transportation week.
Can we talk calendar offline?
Sure.
Yeah, you can tell me whatever you want, but I'm afraid what I'm going to hear. And let's figure that one out as we get the final analysis, and we just do it first and then bring it on everybody. Hey, this is the deal. Thank you. Sorry. I want to inspire folks that we have time because I don't know. A little bit. Did you hear that, y'all? There's a little bit of time we're going to be able to manufacture. That's as much as I'm comfortable putting out there right now. Okay, so I think that's everything on our agenda except we have 2 items left. The next one is my favorite part of this committee, assembly member discussion on pending business or update from committees. So I'll start with just one comment. The online checkbook went live today. I'm very excited. It's version 1. There will be some updated future projects coming. The product that's developed only exports records from SAP. It doesn't provide to you like I would like it to, and eventually hopefully will, not just the reference to the contract and what date it was signed and how much it was worth, but the actual contract itself. So you can read the terms and other items of that nature. And I'll speak briefly to, again, what I will tell anybody, if you have time, look at the open data portal for Normal, Illinois. That's where I'm going to drive us. So with that, I'm going to start with the folks on the phone. Mr. Myers, are you there?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm here.
So this is updates on anything you want to share with members, pending business or committee, whatever you want to talk about. Free form.
I really don't have a whole lot to add. Zach and I are working on a proposal that we're going to bring forward to maybe have a tax incentive or tax break for volunteer firefighters and EMS that'll affect Chudiak and then his down in Girdwood. So I know Dean or Matt's working on that now, but that's really it.
Awesome. My only suggestion there is make sure you check with the tax assessor and the state law, because all these great ideas always run into the meat grinder of Juneau. So,
yeah, no, they've already done this in Fairbanks and on the Kenai.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Anyone else comment on that? No. Okay, Mr. Martinez, updates on current and pending legislation that you wish to talk about.
Cool, thank you. Just wanted to offer appreciation to the members that were able to join this morning, the Community and Economic Development Committee, and to encourage other folks that weren't able to join to listen in to that meeting. There was a wonderful presentation from the Anchorage Community Land Trust and Mr. Kirk Rose, and on the work that they're doing, the partnerships that are potential for the municipality to be investing in, with some real small business focused economic development strategies that I know we already aligned to. So if folks are not familiar, that information is published on our website as well, on the Community Economic Development Committee's website. We also had the presentation from Showdown, the folks who put on the Solstice concert last year. And I just wanted to flag that because back to the question of the roles, fundamentally, as much as we can be out in front of trying to have the city not be in a position where the administration is pitting economic development and creative opportunities against the most vulnerable because of lack of action or inaction or bad action with respect to unhoused neighbors. So just wanted to put that out there early on. We started that conversation. Lastly, I'm working on a piece of, right now we're introducing Mr. Johnson and myself. There's an item on the docket for improving safety on public transportation, starting point as an arc of growing transit ridership and really deepening an investment and focal point of public transportation. So I encourage members to take a look at that. That's on our agenda for the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Salt.
Sorry, let me come off mute. Thanks, Mr. Constant. So things coming up. We have the STR coming up on the 27th, so looking forward to getting that behind us. Also, over at AEDC, as you found out last week, they're working on a sales tax initiative for, I believe, the April 25 ballot. So starting to work with them on that, and look forward to that progressing. Also, don't have time for it yet, but I know Rep. Coulomb introduced House Bill 89 regarding daycare, and I've met with her, and she said there might be some good legislation that could complement that at the municipal level. I believe it's around licensing or certification, just again to make daycare a little bit more accessible. And then finally, looking forward to heading down to Juneau in a couple weeks with the group to help communicate on our priorities for the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Presverdia.
Thank you, Chris. Not much to add. I've continued to work on Prop 14 work. So hopefully we'll have something to bring forward as next rules committee in terms of update on that. And yeah, and then a number of other things in the works, but nothing I'm willing to share at this point. So that's probably it.
Cameron, so the Prop 14 group, when at the beginning of this committee, I had discussed that I want to set up for every Friday in March a roundtable discussion with the assembly and various groups. And I think one of those weeks I would love to have that group be, and maybe there's the child care group and there's also the process for alcohol tax group, maybe a meeting with those groups as a kind of a roundtable conversation in the room. So I just want to flag that for you, that you may be getting an ask.
Great. Yeah. And then just, I know a number of people got an email probably from Kelly Lessons about the idea of moving $5 million in sports over to the municipality. I don't know if anybody's planning on getting back to her, and we're working on that, but I wanted to put that on the table as well. She approached me yesterday to talk about that, and I think I just sent a text to Anna about it. Chris, I know you got an email about it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was another thing that I just wanted to put on the table.
Thank you. And I think Ms. Brawley will speak to that.
Yeah, and I'll give my other updates
great.
later. So yeah, I did, Ms. Lessons wrote to me and Meg and Chris, and so that was just our little pot of three. But I wrote back to her, her ask was essentially, could we appropriate that $5 million under the cap in the next 2 weeks? And I explained that's not feasible. So I think it's a long-term conversation, but it's not procedurally feasible for us to turn that around. And I think there's bigger questions about whether, whether that's the right policy choice. So not to say that I don't support activities or things like that, but yeah, I think it's a bigger picture question.
And for my part, I looped myself out of that conversation, but separately spoke with Kelly about the Ignite program and the funding that's available for that, because they're also suffering a major hole there. And it was interesting, a conversation I've had about it. It's like, I don't want to diss sports, and I don't want to diss the program for kids in the Ignite program. And so if we do go down that road, I would like us to find a way to do both, because sports are a path for some people to get to college. A lot of kids, it's a very important aspect. And this Ignite program is also a program that can help kids get ahead. And so I don't know that I would be on the side of funding all of that $5 million at once if we do have the bandwidth, but maybe being a partner in that process. And so I look forward to that conversation as it comes along. Mr. Gates?
First, I'm sorry, I didn't read the email from Ms. Lessons yet, so I'm not sure exactly what it's all about, but it sounds like the school district's budget and asking for 5 million added. And I guess this is the point. I would just remind everybody that the assembly, we are able to approve the school district's total budget, total amount. Don't get to appropriate or decide where that money goes. So you could increase 5 million, and then the school board and administration over there at ASD could decide to spend it on whatever they want, not necessarily Ignite or sports or whatever.
Understand, and their email demonstrated what we don't have a financial analyst to review for us, that they anticipate being $5 million under what we can levy for the school district, under the maximum local contribution. And so we'll figure that out if we can. We have a long history of funding the school district to what we can. But I think that's the bigger question that Ms. Barley was referring to. We have to look at it in the context of first quarter, all of our priorities, what money is available, and did we tax to the cap or not on the school district allocation? So those are the broader questions, but having a conversation with the ASD, the school board, on the priorities is something we can do. And yes, we cannot line item money for their budget, which is fine. So I think last on the phone, Mr. Rivera. Were you done, Mr. Salt?
Yes, Mr. Cameron, I have one more quick item.
I'm sorry, Mr. Presbyterian, that's who had the floor. Go ahead, Mr. Presbyterian.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to add, I think that, thank you for saying that, because I think the conversation is long-term related to Ms. Lesson's ask. So, but one more thing, I didn't hear whether there was a specific follow-up on the merging of the two committees. Is there someone who's going to take the lead on beginning that conversation? Is there a next step?
Yeah, Claire and I will work on a final discussion about the update to the committee process. The chair sets the committees. If there are objections from the members, then we can talk about it, but we'll get to that pretty soon. I'm leaving for a week, so it probably isn't going to be within the next week, but probably within the week after that.
Great. Okay. Great. Thanks.
I'm opting as much as possible for maximum local control of committees. So, right. So, okay, Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So my updates are on really my committee work. I don't have much going on outside of my committee work. I'll start with the audit committee. So at the last audit committee meeting, we did get an update on the ACFR, the Annual Comprehensive Financial Review, which is an annual audit that is done, and there's a whole bunch of different parts to the audit. The administration is hoping to get the audit done by the end of March. And the reason that they have put that deadline is that there is a requirement from the state for our SEMT money that we must get our audited financials to them by the end of March. If not, I was told after the committee got off the record that we could possibly lose $20 million in SEMT money that has already been allocated in the budget. So that's something that certainly is, Alden is on top of it, and he wants to make sure that we do not lose those $20 million. Aside from that, and the administration has already gotten all of the possible administrative extensions that they could get. So, aside from that, if the administration can't get the ACFR done by the end of March, it might be something that we start talking to legislators about to let them know, hey, this is on our radar. We don't want to lose these $20 million. Moving on, Housing and Homelessness Committee, a lot of my work there. You all are going to see at some point soon, definitely, probably in March, definitely before April, a package come together from myself, perhaps another member or two, and the administration tackling some abatement code changes in advance of summer in hopes that we can maybe have a little bit more of a organized summer versus a chaotic summer, which we've had the last couple of summers. So that'll be, I think, a big package that we'll definitely have to chew on a lot. Otherwise, I'm doing my best to keep track of the housing investments we've made to make sure that they are achieving the goal. Thanks.
Thank you. Now on there, Mr. Johnson.
I guess just one small project that I highlighted. This kind of came about because I was working with Mr. Martinez on this protections for public transit workers, but we kind of through that process discovered that the local definition of what constitutes a crime of domestic violence, that relationship, is actually different and a little bit more narrow in the municipality of Anchorage than it is at the state level, which intuitively doesn't make sense to me, and I'm not sure if there's a rational reason for that. So Mr. Martinez and I are working with Matthew Hurd to look at probably just changing the local definition to mirror what the state has.
Anything else? No? Okay, Ms. Braga?
I brought this up last time, but I'm going to throw it out there again that Mr. Martinez and I have worked with a couple of citizens on a peace resolution. And we've had, you've heard at the assembly meetings, the impassioned speakers that are concerned about what's going on and how it affects what's happening in Israel, Palestine affects people here in Anchorage deeply. I've had several meetings with a couple of engineers here in town, and one of the people that I spoke with, is this all right, Mr.? Oh, one of the people I spoke with actually was my children's, her dad was my children's engineering professor at UAA, and they had family members that lost their homes in Palestine. So the resolution that we put together that I know was sent out to all of you just talks about how we are one of the most diverse communities in the U.S. We have certainly the most diverse high schools, that we are talking about being bridge builders and welcoming cities and having the virtues of peace, mutual respect, understanding, compassion. And no matter what side you are on this, taking of civilian lives is not okay. So we would love if someone would sign on with us. I know that individually, people who have been involved have been reaching out to assembly members. And, if nothing happens, I want them to know that we hear you and that your efforts at coming to assembly meetings and sitting through there and speaking passionately are heard. And we do hope we can bring this forward. Thanks.
Ms. Brawley?
Yeah, thanks. I have several, but not really new things, just updates or things that have been mentioned. I mentioned in public safety yesterday, wanting to look at Public Safety Advisory Commission, so something that came up in an assembly meeting. I'm going to be working with Cameron, and then of course, we could have 3 members, but I think the goal is to have that conversation with many, because I know many people are interested. So look for the March public safety meeting for that. I don't have a specific end point for that, just we wanted to talk about that commission. Alcohol policy project, there's a couple meetings on the calendar you might see as public notices for February and March. I'm going to cancel those because I'm working with Chris, and we talked about picking that up in the summer. So certainly some folks want that to move forward, but we'll come back to that. Home initiative, just to note, you'll see more information about that in the next couple weeks. We've got a whole public engagement plan. Not that all members need to participate in that per se, but just so you know, moving toward a hearing at a special Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on Monday, March 18th. And then again, it's at this point still slated to come back to the assembly in June. So there's plenty of time. The sponsors are committed to doing robust public engagement before and after planning and zoning. So more information about that, you'll see it come forward. And of course, members are welcome to participate in that as well. But we will be taking the brunt of all the questions.
Jen, so we received an email from the municipal attorney that caused me great concern relating to this project, because it was addressed to council. It was relating to a project that sponsors are working on, and it made assertions that felt not clear, maybe not accurate. There were references to state and local law that didn't seem right. And it's as a member, if my project had been treated that way by one of the attorneys, I would have felt like my attorney-client privilege had been violated by the municipal attorney. And never do we want that to happen. It's happened to me once here, and it was very bad. With that said, is there any discussion by the sponsors of having a communication sent by council that would clarify any of the statements within that communication that was sent out about this particular piece of legislation?
Yeah, so I'll turn to Dean, but just to say, yeah, I was on those emails where we left it was to let the attorneys work it out. So I'll defer to Dean.
Mr. Gates.
Yes, thank you. So as Chris mentioned, there was that email that was copied to all assembly members, so they're aware. But we did have some other discussions with just the sponsors of the home initiative ordinance and the attorneys, and we're working on a response. So don't get worried about that in the coming days, weeks. We hope to respond by tomorrow. But anyways, there may be just, I guess, suffice to say some differences of perspective. And but I think that's all I want to say about it. The issues that I mentioned for now, but I did want to ask Ms. Brawley. I thought I heard that the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting where they were going to hear the home initiative ordinance March. I thought that there was some talk about putting that off to an April Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. I'm not sure if I've tracked that.
Yeah, so just to briefly clarify, so originally it was March 4th, which is a regular meeting. On Friday the 2nd, we had a meeting where we discussed with planning and the mayor's office, April 8th, pushing it back a little bit. And then later planning reached out to us and said, hey, we could actually schedule a public meeting and a work session. So it would be a special meeting on March 18th because their April agenda is full. So it was a moving target, but I think we've got it figured out.
Thanks. I hope it stops moving.
If I were a sponsor, I'd move it to me, but that's just me. Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thanks. So just a few other updates. Alcohol tax strategic plan. There will be public outreach. One opportunity is on Saturday at the Betty Davis African American Summit, which will be at Betty Davis East High School. I believe it's 9 to 5. So stop by because that's a great event, but also stop by if you want to see the strategic plan documents. The Prop 14 stuff, thank you, Cameron, for giving the update. This is the Early Childhood Fund. I'll just mention, Randy, you mentioned Coulombe's bill, HB 89, and childcare licensing. I think our group has also been identifying regulatory or other kind of code changes that might be appropriate. So I know it's tricky with the Open Meetings Act, but if you can maybe hold off on doing a separate project or let us work through that, because we're going to come up with things outside of funding, I think that that might need to change, but happy to talk about that later. I'll also flag that with Kevin Cross leaving the body in April, we will be seeking another third on that. Can't do it before he's gone, obviously, because he's a current member, but just to note, that opportunity will be there. Two other brief updates. Legislative committee, just to mention, that is a committee. I know that we have expanded the scope, but the goal is to just mostly be active during session. So everybody's welcome. We meet monthly. Feel free to bring any issues, like for example, HB 89, the childcare licensing that you'd like to discuss. But of course, we don't have to run everything through the committee. So if you want to take a position on something, you could draft a resolution to bring to the body with or without the committee. And lastly, I just want to mention there's a conference coming up called Arctic Encounter. It will actually be happening at the Denina on Wednesday, April 12th through Wednesday, April 10th through Friday, April 12th. I don't know much about it other than it looks really cool. I asked staff to circulate the registration. I registered myself. It looks like there's going to be a lot of federal, state, tribal, local, all kinds of interesting folks, art, really cool kind of conference. So I encourage everybody to attend. Thanks.
All right. Yep. Thanks. And I don't have anything specific. I'm prepared to update anyone on legislation that I'm working on. We do have an interesting item on the agenda. 3 items on the agenda for Tuesday that we've already voted down. The administration has decided to put back before us, and I anticipate communication going out so folks can watch the deliberation the last time to be prepared for the conversation this time, so we don't have to walk through Groundhog Day and have the same conversation again. So stand by looking for that link, and I hope you get a chance to review it. So with that, audience participation. Not seeing anyone. Come on, Wesley, it's your chance. Nope, he's not. So with that, audience participation, we're closed, and I would ask then for a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
That's quick.